There is a village at the edge of the world. You cannot find it on any modern map. No road leads there. No sign marks its name. But if you close your eyes, if you let the weight of the day begin to leave your shoulders, slowly, the way frost melts from stone in the first warmth of morning, you might find your way there. It is evening, late evening, the kind that comes in the far north, where the sky does not go dark so much as it deepens, slowly, the way a bowl fills with water. The light does not vanish. It retreats. It pulls back from the hillsides and the fjord and the long grass bending in the coastal wind, and it gathers itself somewhere just below the horizon, a soft amber glow that lingers long after the sun itself has gone to sleep. The village is settling. This is the sound of it, the low conversation of two women finishing the last of their day's weaving, their voices unhurried, their words trailing off into comfortable silence. The shuffle of a dog rearranging itself near a doorway. The distant sound of water, always the water, in this place the fjord breathing in and out against the pebbled shore. A child calling once, twice, then going quiet. Somewhere, the closing of a heavy wooden door. The thunk of a beam sliding into place. The day is done. You do not need to hold on to it anymore. This village has stood here for generations beyond counting. The long houses, those great, low-slung structures with their curved walls and turf-covered roofs, seem almost to grow from the earth itself, as if the land simply decided, one day, to take shelter from the rain. Their walls are made from timber and wattle, packed with clay and moss and the patient attention of hands that knew what they were doing. The roofs breathe. On cold mornings, you can see the mist rising from the sod above, as though the house itself is dreaming. Inside those walls, people have been born. Storms have been waited out. Stories have been told so many times that the words have worn smooth, like river stones, like something precious carried for a long time in a pocket. Tonight, as the last light leaves the sky, the fires are lit. Not the great fires of ceremony or alarm, those are different. Those carry urgency, a sharpness that cuts through the cold air. No, these are the small fires of evening. Hearthfires, the kind that ask nothing of you. They simply burn, and in their burning, they offer something that no word quite captures, a warmth that is not only warmth, a light that is not only light, but a presence, a companionship. The smoke rises through the hole in the roof of the longhouse, and as it rises, it carries with it the smell of the day pine resin, salt fish, wet wool drying slowly near the flame, the faint sweetness of barley bread baked in the afternoon. These are not grand smells. They are not the smells of palaces or temples. They are the smells of a life being lived, carefully, day by day, in a hard and beautiful place. Sit with that smell for a moment. Let it be enough. The hearth fire in a Norse longhouse was called the Aron, the central fire, the heart of the home. It was never allowed to go out completely. Even on the warmest summer nights, some ember was kept alive, banked beneath ash, waiting. There was wisdom in this, and not only practical wisdom. The fire was understood to be a kind of continuity, a thread connecting this night to all the nights before it, and to all the nights that would come after. As long as the fire lived, the family lived. As long as the family lived, the fire burned. You are sitting beside that fire now. There is no need to speak, no need to explain yourself or prove anything or remember what you were supposed to do tomorrow. In this place, at this hour, you are simply here. A body in the warmth, a pair of eyes watching the flame, a breath going in, and out, and in again. The fire moves the way fire always moves, never quite the same from one moment to the next, never predictable, never still. A log shifts, a spray of sparks rises and vanishes. The flame leans in one direction, then another, responding to some current of air too subtle to feel on your skin. There is something hypnotic in this, something that the mind can follow without effort, without goal, without any place it needs to arrive. Just the fire, just the sound of it, a soft, low crackling, like the sound of a message being written in a language older than words. Outside, the stars are coming. In the Norse world, the sky at night was not empty, it was populated. Every star, every constellation, every strange light that moved across the heavens had a name, a story, a place in the great architecture of meaning that the Norse people had built across centuries. The Milky Way, that long, pale river of light stretching from one horizon to the other, was known as Vethurebraut, the weather way, or sometimes as the path the gods themselves traveled when they moved between worlds. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. For now, just look up. If you stepped outside the longhouse at this hour, if you ducked through the low doorway and stood in the cool night air, breathing in the salt and the fur and the faint mineral sharpness of the fjord, you would see a sky that most of us have forgotten. In a world without electric light, without the orange haze that now sits above every city and town, the darkness is complete. And in that complete darkness, the stars are not points of light. They are layers, depths, a whole other world piled on top of this one, visible only at night, only in the stillness, only to those patient enough to wait for their eyes to open fully. In the far north, where Viking villages clung to the edges of fjords and coastlines, the nights in certain seasons could last for many hours, and the people who lived beneath those long dark skies became intimate with them. The way you become intimate with something you spend a great deal of time in the presence of. They knew which star to follow to the north. They knew the patterns that announced the coming of winter, the return of spring. They watched the sky the way a reader watches a page, not passively, but with attention, with interpretation, with the sense that something important was being said. Come back inside now. The fire is still burning. Someone has added a piece of wood, a thick section of birch, pale and smooth on the outside, with the rough-cut face of fresh wood at the break, and it has settled into the embers with a soft sigh. The flame reaches up to embrace it. Give it a little time. In a few minutes, it will be glowing steadily, warmly, without drama. The children in the longhouse have been growing quiet for the past hour. You can still hear them, a murmur, a shift in breathing, the sound of small weight redistributing itself in the straw, but the urgency is gone from their sounds. They are approaching sleep the way children do, not all at once, but in stages, like a tide going out, gradual and inevitable. One of the adults reaches for a wooden cup, drinks slowly, sets it down. The dog sighs. This is the fullness of an evening in the Viking Age, not as it is often imagined, not as helmeted warriors and dramatic sea crossings and the clash of iron, but as it truly, mostly was an ordinary human evening, in a small community, at the edge of a vast and beautiful darkness. People tired from honest work, people warming themselves at a fire, people preparing to sleep. There were many kinds of people in a Norse village. The farmers who worked the thin soil of the coastal valleys, coaxing rye and barley and root vegetables from the earth with the methodical patience of those who know they cannot afford to fail. The fishermen, whose boats had gone out before dawn and returned in the afternoon with their holds filled with herring and cod, whose hands were rough with salt and rope burn. The smiths, who worked iron into tools and fittings and the occasional weapon, whose forges gave off a heat that could be felt from across the yard. The weavers, the carpenters, the healers who knew which plants to use for which ailments, and who kept that knowledge carefully, passing it from one pair of hands to the next. And among them, moving through the village like a current moves through water, always present, always felt, were the skalds, the poets, the storytellers. In the Norse world, the skald held a position of extraordinary importance. This was a society that placed tremendous value on the spoken word, on the ability to shape language into something that could carry meaning across generations, that could honor the living and the dead, that could hold a community together through the long winters and the longer silences. A great skald was a keeper of memory, a weaver of identity, someone who understood that a story, told well, was not merely entertainment, but a kind of architecture, a structure that people could live inside. On an evening like this, a skald might settle near the fire and begin, not with fanfare, not with any kind of ceremony, simply with a voice, and the intention to speak, and the knowledge that the people gathered around the fire are ready to listen. The stories that a Norse skald might tell on such an evening were many and various. Some were histories, accounts of battles, of voyages, of kings and jarls, and the intricate politics of a world in which power was always being negotiated, always shifting. Some were genealogies, the long chains of names and relationships that connected the present to the past, that told each person in the room who they were and where they came from. And some, perhaps the most powerful, perhaps the ones best suited for an evening like this one, when the fire is low, and the children are drifting towards sleep, were the myths, the great myths, the ones that explained not what had happened, but what always happens, not the story of a particular storm, but the nature of storms, not the fate of one man, but the shape of all fates. Let me tell you one of them now. In the beginning, there was nothing. The Norse word is ginungogop, the great void, the yawning emptiness before creation. It is a difficult concept to hold in the mind, because the mind is always trying to fill emptiness with something. But try to imagine a silence so complete that the concept of sound has not yet been invented. A darkness so total that light is only a possibility, a potential, a word that hasn't been spoken yet. Ginungogop. In this void, two things came into being, one from each direction, like thoughts arriving from opposite ends of the mind. From the north came Niflheim, a world of ice, of mist, of cold so ancient and absolute that it felt like the original condition of all things. From the south came Muspelheim, a world of fire, of heat, of light so fierce that it too felt like a kind of fundamental truth. Between these two extremes, something happened. Where the ice met the fire, in that borderland of Ginnungagop where temperatures collided, and the impossible middle ground between freezing and burning somehow existed there, in the mist and the melt and the slow drip of thawing ice life began. The first being was Ymir, the primordial giant. He was not created, exactly. He condensed. He emerged from the interaction of cold and heat the way a face sometimes emerges from a pattern of clouds. Not deliberately, but inevitably, given the right conditions. Ymir slept, and as he slept, his body sweated, and from that sweat, other beings formed. The first humans, some said, or the first of the giants, or both. And from the ice there also emerged a great cow of Umbla, whose name meant something like the hornless one who gives abundant milk. She sustained Ymir with her milk, 4 rivers flowing constantly from her body, and she, in turn, sustained herself by licking the salt from the ice. As she licked, something appeared in the ice, a shape. Over 3 days, it emerged, first the hair, then the head, then the whole form of a being, Buri, the first of the gods, grandfather of Odin. The fire does not ask you to remember all of this, it is only asking you to drift, to let the story move through you the way water moves through stone, not by force, but by time, by patience, by the willingness to be porous. Odin. Even the name carries weight. Even the name, spoken quietly beside a fire, on a night like this, seems to shift something in the air. In the Norse tradition, Odin was not simply a god of war, as he is sometimes described in modern retellings. He was something far more complex, far more unsettling, far more interesting than a warrior with a spear. He was the god of wisdom and of poetry, of magic, of death, of the runes, those ancient symbols carved into wood and stone that carried meaning so dense, so layered, that a single rune could open into an entire philosophy. He was also the god of wandering. The Norse imagined Odin as a traveler. He moved through the 9 worlds in disguise, often as an old man, grey-cloaked and wide-brimmed hatted, leaning on a staff, one eye covered or simply absent, traded away long ago for a drink from the well of wisdom. He moved among humans. He listened to their stories. He whispered things into the ears of poets and kings alike. He was drawn to the edges of things, the borderlands between knowledge and mystery, between life and what comes after. In many of the stories, Odin is not fully at rest. Even in the halls of Asgard, even at the great feast table, even surrounded by the noise and warmth of companionship, there is something in him that is still listening, still watching, still aware that the world is larger and stranger than any single perspective can contain. Perhaps that is why he traveled. Perhaps that is why, even now, on an evening like this one, you might imagine him somewhere at the edge of your awareness, that sense you sometimes get, late at night, that there is more to the dark than simple darkness, that the world you can see is only one layer of a much deeper world. The fire shifts, a log settles, the dog has moved closer to the heat. You can see its sides rising and falling, slow and steady, the rhythm of deep contentment. Let your own breathing find that rhythm, in and out. There is no hurry here, there is no way you were supposed to be. Even the night itself is patient. It has been doing this for an age before you arrived, and will continue long after, spreading itself over the land and the sea with the same unhurried generosity it always has. The sea. Always, in the Norse world, the sea. It is impossible to understand the Norse people, their courage, their restlessness, their mythology, their particular way of looking at the world without understanding their relationship to the water. They lived beside it, on it, in many ways inside it, in the sense that it shaped everything. Their geography was determined by it. Their economy depended on it. Their language was saturated with it. Words for different types of waves, different qualities of wind, different shades of water, different kinds of silence that could fall over the sea in certain conditions. To walk to the edge of the village, as someone might do on a night like this one, and look out at the fjord, that long, calm arm of the ocean, reaching inland between steep walls of rock, is to encounter something that defies simple description. The water is dark now. It holds the last light of the sky in a way that seems almost deliberate, as if the fjord has chosen to keep some brightness for itself after the rest of the world has released it. The surface is still. The winds that blow in off the open ocean have quieted with the evening, and the fjord rests, dark and glassy and impossibly deep. The sound of it is almost nothing, a small, repeated syllable at the shoreline, the water touching the stones, withdrawing, touching again. It is the smallest sound in the world, and also somehow the most complete. The Norse had a word, hafgedinga, for a particular kind of strange stillness that could fall over the sea, a silence so total, so unexpected, that sailors who encountered it felt unnerved, as if the ocean were holding its breath, as if it were thinking. They were not wrong to feel this way. The ocean does not think, of course, but it is old, incomprehensibly old. It was here before the long houses, before the villages, before the first boat was pushed out from the first shore by the first person willing to trust their life to the water. It will be here after all of us, after everything we have made. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from sitting beside something that vast, and that patient a peace that has to do with proportion, with the sudden, gentle realization that you are very small, and that being very small is not the same as being unimportant. You are small. The night is large. Both of these things are true, and they do not contradict each other. Back beside the fire now. Back to the warmth and the smell of wood smoke and the slow, even breathing of people who are, one by one, releasing the day. There is a word in Old Norse hugger that is often translated as mind or soul, but which carries a richer meaning than either of those English words quite captures. The hugger was understood to be a kind of animating force, the part of a person that was most truly themselves, their courage, their will, their capacity for thought and feeling. But the hugger was also understood to be somewhat mobile, not entirely confined to the body. On certain nights, particularly at the edge of sleep, the hugger might wander. The Norse had no word for this that carries across cleanly into English, but the concept is not so foreign to us. The feeling of the mind ranging outward just before sleep, the half-dreaming state in which thought becomes image and image becomes almost story. This is something human beings have known in every culture, in every century. Your hugger is beginning to wander now. Let it. There is no harm in it. The fire is watching. The walls of the longhouse hold. The dog breathes. The sea moves in its dark, patient rhythm at the foot of the hill. Where does the mind go, in those last moments before sleep? Sometimes it follows a face someone loved, someone long unseen, appearing with the unexpected clarity that comes in the half-dreaming state. Sometimes it follows a sound, a piece of music, a voice, a phrase that keeps turning over like a smooth stone in a current. Sometimes it follows a light, or a color, or a sensation too vague to name but deeply familiar, something that has to do with safety, or with belonging, or with the particular quality of a certain kind of afternoon in childhood. In the Norse tradition, the boundary between waking and sleeping was not a hard line. It was a passage, a shoreline, where two worlds met. On one side, the waking world with all its weight and particularity. On the other, something larger, something less constrained, something that the Norse described in various ways as the realm of dreams, as the other world, as the space between the roots of Yggdrasil, the great world tree, where time moves differently and the ordinary rules of cause and effect soften and blur. Yggdrasil, the world tree. If there is one image at the center of Norse cosmology, it is this one. Not a battle, not a ship on the sea, not even a god with a hammer, but a tree, an immense ash tree whose roots reach down into the deepest wells of the cosmos and whose branches spread across all 9 worlds, holding them together the way a skeleton holds a body together, the way a spine holds everything else in alignment. Imagine it. Try, really, to imagine it, a tree so large that the sky is simply the underside of its canopy. Its roots descend into 3 wells: the well of wisdom, where Odin traded his eye for a single drink; the well of earth, where the 3 Norns, those great, unhurried weavers of fate, sit and spin the threads of every life that has ever been or will ever be; in the well of Agelmir, the boiling spring, where the oldest darkness pools and waits. Along the trunk, there are things living. An eagle sits in the upper branches, wise and watchful. A dragon, Nithhogr, gnaws at the roots far below, slowly, patiently, the way all things that destroy are patient. And between them, running up and down the trunk, delivering messages and insults in both directions, is a squirrel Ratatosk, whose name might be translated as something like Drilltooth. A creature of mischief and movement, carrying words from the highest to the lowest and back again, keeping the tension alive. This is not an accident. In a cosmology organized around a great tree, the relationship between the highest and lowest things is constant, maintained by something small and fast and possibly irresponsible. The universe, in the Norse imagination, was held together not by divine decree, but by ongoing relationship, by the constant exchange of messages between very different kinds of beings, by the maintenance of connection across vast distances and vast differences. There is wisdom in this, if you let it settle. The fire is lower now. You have been sitting beside it for a long time. The room has grown warmer and darker, both at once. Warmer because the fire has been burning, darker because your eyes have adjusted, because the pupils have opened, because the body has begun to do the slow, involuntary work of preparation for sleep. Your shoulders have dropped. You may not have noticed, but they have. Your jaw is softer than it was an hour ago. Your hands are still. This is how the Vikings ended their evenings. Not with dramatic gestures or rituals of farewell. Simply with the fire getting low, and the bodies getting heavy, and the eyes getting slow, and the gradual, comfortable dissolution of the clear line between waking and whatever comes next. Some of them would have said a word before sleeping. A brief acknowledgement of the gods, of the night, of the protection of the household spirits, the land vetir, those invisible presences associated with particular places, particular landscapes, who were understood to be the guardians of the land and all those who lived upon it. Not prayers exactly, more like greetings, like the kind of quiet word you might say to a companion before turning over to sleep. I'm here, the night is here, all is well. Let the long house hold what it holds. Let the fire do its slow, quiet work. Let the stars move through their long arcs above the turf roof, following their ancient paths, utterly unconcerned with whether anyone is watching. There is a Norse concept called frithra, a word usually translated as peace, but which carries more than our English word typically does. It encompasses safety, certainly, and the absence of conflict, but also something like rightness, the sense that things are as they should be, that the world is in order, that there is nothing here that needs to be fixed or fought or figured out. Frithra is not the peace of emptiness, it is the peace of completeness. That is what you are resting in, right now. Frithra. The dog has fully flattened itself to the floor, that particular posture of total canine surrender that means all is right with the world. Its eyes are closed. Its breathing is deep and even. It has already crossed into that other country and seems very comfortable there. The fire is mostly embers now. This is the best phase of a fire, for sleeping, when the drama of flame has given way to the quiet, deep glow of coals, hot and steady and unhurried, radiating a warmth that seems to come not from the surface, but from somewhere deeper inside the wood. Some stored warmth from a summer years ago now slowly, finally releasing. Let that warmth be yours. Let it fill the spaces in you that have been holding tension, holding worry, holding the particular weight of a particular day in a particular life that, tonight, does not need to be carried any further. You can put it down. Right here, it will still be there when you wake. But for now, for this part of the night, there is only the ember glow, and the dark, and the sound of the fjord at the bottom of the hill, touching the stones with its small, repeated gesture of arrival. Here, 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 look up. Even from inside the longhouse, through the smoke hole in the roof, that careful opening left in the turf and timber, designed to let the fire breathe, you can see a narrow corridor of sky. A dark strip, studded with light. Just a few stars, from this angle. Just a suggestion of the great field of them that stretches above. But go outside for a moment. Just for a moment. Step through the low doorway, duck your head, the way everyone does, the way the threshold demands a small bow from everyone who crosses it, and stand in the cool night air. Feel it on your face. The difference between inside and outside is remarkable. Inside, the warmth has been accumulating for hours, pressed into the walls and the floor and the people sitting near the fire. Outside, the air is clean and cold and carries the smell of the sea and the pine forests on the hillside. And something else beneath those, something mineral and ancient, the smell of stone that has been here longer than anything. Stand still. Let your eyes open. It takes time, this. The eyes that have been watching firelight need several minutes to find their full capacity in the dark. The pupils expand slowly, like a hand opening. And as they open, the sky reveals itself not all at once, but in layers, depth behind depth, stars behind stars, until what looked like a simple dark sky becomes something so rich, so populated, so impossibly vast that the mind goes quiet in the face of it. The Norse navigators knew this sky the way a scholar knows a text. They had studied it across countless nights, across seasons, across years of sea crossings where the sky was the only map available. There were no compasses in the early Viking age, or rather, there were instruments, clever ones, discs of crystal called solastien, sunstones, that could locate the position of the sun, even through cloud and fog, by measuring the polarization of light. But at night, on the open ocean, it was the stars that told you where you were and where you were going. The most important star was the one that did not move. Lithastjana, the guiding star, what we call the North Star, Polaris, that fixed point around which all the other stars revolve. the still center of the turning sky. A Viking navigator standing on the deck of a long ship in the middle of the open Atlantic, with nothing visible in any direction but water and sky, could look up and find that star and know, with certainty, one absolute and reliable fact: north is there. Everything else could be calculated from that. The Norse called certain star patterns by names that told stories. The constellation we know as Orion's belt, those three bright stars in a nearly perfect line, was seen by some northern peoples as the spindle of a great loom, weaving the fabric of the night sky. The Pleiades, the tight cluster of faint stars that appears in autumn, was associated with the turning of the year, a signal that winter was coming and preparations should be made. The Milky Way Vethurabraut, the weather way, was understood as a river in the sky, a road travelled by the gods, a seam between this world and the next. Stand under it now. Let the Milky Way be what it is, not a metaphor, not a story, just light. Ancient light, from stars so distant that the photons arriving at your eye right now began their journey before human beings existed, before this village, before the first boat was ever pushed from shore. That light has been traveling all that time, through all that darkness, and tonight it arrives here, at this exact moment, falling on your upturned face. You are the destination of a very long journey. The air is cool on your cheeks. Come back inside now. The fire is waiting, and the stars will still be there. They are always there, even in daylight, even when you cannot see them. The sky is always full. You simply have to wait for the dark to make it visible. Down at the shore, the boats are resting. This is easy to forget. In the stories, the boats are always moving in the stories, always cutting through waves, always carrying warriors or explorers or traders towards some distant horizon. But most of the time, the boats simply rested, pulled up onto the beach, or moored in the shallow water of the inlet, or drawn up into a boathouse where they were sheltered from the worst of the winter ice. Most of the time, they waited. Walk down the hill for a moment, to where the water meets the land. The grass gives way to rock, and the rock gives way to gravel, and the gravel gives way to the dark wet stones at the waterline, each one smoothed by centuries of tidal motion into something almost perfectly round, almost perfectly smooth, like objects that have been worried by enormous patient hands until all their sharp edges are gone. The boat is here, one of the smaller ones, not a great ocean-going longship, but a working vessel, a fairing, perhaps, with 4 oars and a shallow draft, the kind used for fishing the fjord and moving between nearby settlements. It is drawn up just above the tide line and tied loosely to an iron ring set into the rock. It moves slightly, even here, even on the still water of the inlet, a small, rhythmic motion, responding to the breathing of the fjord. Look at it. Really look at it. The wood is dark with water and age and use. There is a smell coming from it, tar and salt and something organic, the accumulated smell of many mornings on the water, many nets drawn in, many hands gripping the oars in the grey dawn before the village has woken. The inside of the hull is wet with tonight's condensation, and the oars are laid along the bottom, their blades still bearing traces of the day's work. Those oars were pulled by hands that are now at rest. The men who rowed this boat this morning are sleeping, or nearly sleeping, in the longhouse up the hill. Their backs ache in the way that a day of rowing produces a deep, familiar ache. Not painful exactly, more like a reminder, the body's way of recording what it has done. Their hands, wrapped around cups of warm liquid an hour ago, are now open and still. Their breathing has slowed to the rhythm of the deep water beneath the hull of the boat they left behind on the shore. The boat rocks gently. It has nowhere to be tonight. The sea will still be there tomorrow. The oars will still fit in the oarlocks. The nets will still be mended and ready. All of that can be handled when the light comes back. For now, the boat rests with the same completeness with which everything else in this place is resting, fully, without reservation, without any part of itself held back in case it is needed. There is something worth learning in this. The boat that has done its work for the day does not worry about tomorrow's crossing. It simply rests, moving gently with the water, trusting that the rope will hold and the tide will behave and the morning will come in its own time. Let the boat show you something tonight. Let its stillness be a kind of instruction. Come back up the hill now. There is warmth waiting, and something else, a story from much further back, from the deepest roots of the Norse imagination, about the longest night of all. The Norse year had many markers, many moments when the turning of seasons was acknowledged and honored and given ceremony. But among all of them, one stood apart. The winter solstice, the longest night, the shortest day, the moment when the year reached its furthest point from light and began, almost imperceptibly, to turn back toward it. They called it Yule, and it was understood as something more than a calendar event. It was a threshold, a test, a night when the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead grew thin, when the old year died and the new year waited to be born, when everything depended, or so it felt, on whether the fire could be kept burning through the dark. The Yule log was not a decoration, it was a responsibility. A great log, the largest that could be found, often the root section of an oak or a birch. Something dense and slow burning was chosen with care and brought into the longhouse with a kind of ceremony. It was lit from the embers of the previous year's fire, that thread of continuity that was never allowed to break. And then it was tended, through the longest night, by whoever was willing to stay awake and watch. To let the Yule fire go out was unthinkable, not because of superstition exactly, or not only because of superstition, but because the fire represented something real. In the deepest, coldest, darkest part of the year, the fire was the proof that warmth still existed, that light still existed, that the world had not forgotten how to sustain life. To keep the fire burning was to participate in something, to add your small human effort to the enormous project of surviving the dark. Every winter, in every longhouse, in every village along every fjord and coastline of the Norse world, someone sat with the fire through the long night and made sure it did not go out. Someone chose to stay awake so that everyone else could sleep in safety. Think about that for a moment. Think about all the fires that have been kept burning, across all the centuries, by all the people who chose to watch through the dark so that others could rest. This is one of the oldest human acts, one of the most quietly heroic. Not the heroism of battles or sea crossings, but the heroism of simply staying, of being present, of maintaining the warmth against the cold through patient, unheroic, necessary attention. The fire in the hearth tonight is a descendant of all those fires. Every fire is, now, from somewhere near the fire, from that indeterminate place between the floor and the air, between the visible world and the barely imaginable. Something is happening that happens every night, in every place, though we rarely think to call it by a name. The Norns are weaving. The Norse imagined 3 women seated at a great loom at the base of Yggdrasil, the world tree, beside the well of earth. Their names were Earth, Verdundi, and skald, words that carry within them the entire structure of time: what has become, what is becoming, what shall be, past, present, future, though these translations flatten something that in Old Norse felt more like a continuous motion, the way a river is simultaneously its source, its current, and its mouth, all at once, always. They wove the word, the fate, the web of all things. But this was not fate in the sense of a locked door, a predetermined conclusion you had no part in reaching. The Norse understanding of fate was more complex than that, more like a fabric, in which individual threads had their own colors and qualities and tensions, in which the pattern that emerged depended not only on the design the Norns intended, but on the nature of the threads themselves. Your choices were the threads. Your character was the thread. The weaving was ongoing, always in process, never finished until the moment of death, and perhaps not even then. Right now, in this moment, your thread is part of the weaving. This breath you are taking, this slow, heavy, sleep-approaching breath, is part of the pattern. The Norns do not sleep. They work through the night, as they have always worked, as they will always work, their hands moving with the calm efficiency of people who have been doing something long enough that it requires no thought, only presence. You do not need to think about the pattern. You only need to be the thread, warm and soft, and following the pull of the weaving wherever it leads, which tonight, in this moment, leads here, to this breath, to this warmth, to this slowing of the mind that is not a loss but a kind of arrival, the arrival of the place where the thinking ends and something older and quieter begins. The Norns have been weaving your thread for as long as you have existed. They know exactly what they are doing. You can trust the weaving tonight. Now listen, really listen. The longhouse is almost completely quiet. Not the quiet of emptiness, the quiet of fullness. The quiet that comes when everything that needed to happen today has happened, when every voice has said what it needed to say, when the fire has been fed, and the door has been closed and the cold has been held outside where it belongs. This is what that quiet sounds like. The fire barely fire anymore. Mostly the slow breathing of embers makes a sound like the softest possible conversation. Like 2 people talking in another room, whose words you cannot quite catch but whose voices you recognize, whose presence is reassuring. A log settles with a sound like a sigh. A small cascade of ash falls through the grate with the softest imaginable whisper. From outside, carried through the walls and the roof and the gap above the door, the wind moving through the tops of the fir trees on the hillside. Not a strong wind, a gentle one, the kind that moves the highest branches without disturbing anything closer to the ground. It is a sound like breathing, like something enormous slowly breathing in the dark beyond the walls. Beneath at the fjord, always the fjord. That small, repeated syllable at the waterline. You can barely hear it from here. It is at the very edge of audibility, below thought, below attention, somewhere in the region where sound becomes sensation rather than information. And beneath even the door, perhaps woven through everything, so fundamental that it is easy to mistake for silence, the sound of the people in this room, the sound of human beings at rest, the small shifts and adjustments of sleeping bodies, the particular rhythm of a child's breath, faster and lighter than an adult's, the slower, deeper rhythm of someone who has been working all day and is fully surrendered to sleep. Breathe with them. Let your rhythm find theirs. There is a comfort in this that goes beyond simple warmth. The comfort of not being alone. The comfort of being one breathing body among other breathing bodies. Of being part of something small and human and warm in the middle of something vast and dark and cold. This is what the longhouse was, at its deepest purpose, not just a shelter from the weather, but a shelter from solitude. A place where the warmth of bodies and the warmth of fire and the warmth of shared story combined into something that no single person could generate alone. The dog stirs once, lifts its head, looks toward the door with those dark, calm eyes that see things in the dark that we cannot, decides that whatever it sensed requires no action, and lays its head back down with a sound that might be, if dogs make such things, a sigh of satisfaction. All is well. The embers know it. The walls know it. The sleeping children know it in their bones, even without knowing that they know it. And somewhere in your chest, in the slow warm center of you that is neither thought nor feeling but something prior to both, you know it too. All is well. The night is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. You are doing exactly what you are supposed to do. The hugger, that animating part of you, the wandering soul force that the Norse understood to be the most truly you part of you, is already beginning to loosen from its daytime moorings. You can feel it, if you pay gentle attention, a quality of expansion, of the edges of yourself becoming less defined, of the boundary between inside and outside becoming softer and more permeable. This is not a loss of self. This is the self doing what it does best when given permission, spreading out, opening up, following the long threads of association and image and feeling wherever they lead, unconstrained by the demands of waking life. The hugger knows the way. It has made this crossing before. Every night of your life, it has made this crossing, and every morning it has returned, carrying sometimes nothing visible, sometimes a dream so vivid it stays with you for days, sometimes just a quality of rest that is itself a kind of gift. Trust it now. Let it go where it goes. The fir trees on the hillside are still. Not entirely still. Nothing in nature is ever entirely still, not even stone, not even the deep bedrock beneath the soil that seems so permanent and immovable but is, on a long enough time scale, as fluid and changeable as water. But to the eye, to the ear, to the body standing at the edge of the longhouse and breathing the cold night air, the trees are still, their dark shapes against the slightly lighter dark of the sky, their branches holding whatever small weight of moisture has condensed on them through the evening, their roots reaching down into the hillside with that patient, absolute grip that trees have, the grip of something that has decided, a long time ago, to stay. There are things that can be learned from trees. The Norse understood this. In a world organized around Yggdrasil, a great ash tree at the center of all things, the tree was not simply a useful material, not simply timber for long ships and long houses. It was a model, a way of being in the world. The tree does not move toward what it needs. It grows toward it, slowly, without urgency, with the absolute confidence of something that knows it has time. The roots reach down into the dark to find water and mineral and the ancient slow chemistry of soil. The branches reach up into the light to find warmth and the energy of the sun. The tree does both at once, always, without choosing between them. It is both reaching down and reaching up, simultaneously grounded and aspiring, belonging to the earth and belonging to the sky in equal measure. In the Norse imagination, Yggdrasil did the same thing on a cosmic scale. Its roots held the underworld, its branches touched the realm of the gods, and everything between the 9 worlds, all of human experience, all of history and fate and the long, slow turning of ages existed within its trunk, within the living wood, within the sap that moved through it in ways no one could see but everyone could trust. You are like the tree tonight. Your roots are the breath going down into the body, the weight of the body finding the floor. the warmth that has accumulated in your skin and your bones and the deep tissues that never quite cool even in cold weather. Your branches are the thoughts that are still moving, still reaching, still finding shapes in the dark, but more slowly now, more gently, with less urgency than they had an hour ago. Both are happening at once, the reaching down and the reaching up. Let them both continue, in their own time, without your supervision. The tree does not supervise its own growing. Somewhere below the village, below the pebbled shoreline and the restless fjord, the bedrock begins. You cannot see it from here. You cannot see it at all. It is covered by centuries of soil and gravel, and the accumulated material of glaciers that came and went before this village existed, before any human eyes looked at this landscape and decided to call it home. But it is there, solid and ancient and utterly indifferent to what happens on its surface, as permanent as anything in this world can be said to be permanent. This is the ground beneath the ground. The Norse were intimate with stone in a way that is difficult for us to fully imagine. Their world was full of it. The granite walls of the fjord, rising hundreds of feet above the water, polished by glaciers into shapes that seemed almost deliberate, almost designed. The great standing stones that marked boundaries and memorialized the dead. The rocks at the shoreline, perpetually wet, perpetually being rearranged by the water in its endless slow project of smoothing everything it touches. Stone was not inert in the Norse imagination. Stone remembered. There is a concept in the Norse world difficult to translate, impossible to fully explain, but perhaps possible to feel, of the memory that exists in things, the accumulated history that objects and places carry within them simply by having been present for a long time. A stone at the edge of a fjord had It had been there through the storms and the calms, through the freezing winters and the brief, luminous summers, through all the boats that had been pushed off from the shore nearby and all the hands that had steadied themselves on it in the dark. It held all of that, not in any way that could be read or translated, simply in the fact of its having been there. You were sitting in a place with tonight. Not this exact place, perhaps, but the night itself as memory. Every night carries the accumulated weight of all the nights before it, all the fires that were lit, all the stories that were told, all the people who looked up at these same stars and felt something similar to what you are feeling now. That particular mixture of smallness and belonging, of being very brief and very present, of knowing that the world will continue long after you, and finding that thought not frightening but somehow comforting. All those people rested, all those fires went to embers, all those nights ended in morning, and all those mornings were followed by days, and all those days came back to evening again, and the fire was lit again, and the story was told again, and someone lay down in the warmth and closed their eyes and let the darkness do what darkness does. You are part of that long chain tonight, one link among countless millions. And your link matters not because you are extraordinary, but because you are here, because you are present, because you are doing the most ordinary and necessary thing in the world, which is resting, which is allowing the body and the mind to do the slow, invisible work of restoration that can only happen in the dark, in the quiet, in the particular quality of surrender that sleep requires. Rest is not the absence of work. Rest is the work. The Norse knew this, a culture that valued courage and endurance and the capacity to withstand difficulty, and the Norse certainly valued all of these things, was also a culture that understood the necessity of recovery. The warrior who could not rest could not fight. The fisherman who could not sleep could not navigate. The farmer who ran himself into the ground had no ground left to farm. The skald who never allowed the mind to wander into the inarticulate territory of dreams had no material to weave into stories. Rest fed everything else, and so it was not weakness to lie down at the end of the day. It was wisdom. It was the recognition that the body is not a machine to be run until it breaks, but a living thing, like the tree, like the fire, like the fjord, something that requires tending, that has its own rhythms and needs, that gives more when it is allowed to receive. Allow yourself to receive. Tonight. The night has been offering this to you for the past hour. It is still offering it. There is a quality of attention that the Norse associated with the very best kind of wisdom. Not the sharp, acquisitive attention of someone trying to grasp and hold and accumulate, but a softer, more receptive quality. An attention that opens rather than reaches. They had a word for the quality of a great leader or a great sage. Wisdom, but in a sense that included patience, that included the willingness to wait for understanding, rather than forcing it, that included the humility to recognize how much remained unknown. Was not something you achieved, it was something you grew into, the way a tree grows into its shape not by deciding, but by responding, over time, to everything the world offered. You are growing into something tonight. Even here, even now, even in the simple act of lying still and breathing and letting the mind go where it goes. The great sagas of the Norse world, those long, intricate prose narratives that recorded the history and mythology and genealogy of a people across centuries, were not the work of a single night or a single mind. They were accumulated, added to and revised and recounted and refined across generations, each teller bringing something new, each new context changing what the old words meant, each new audience asking different questions of the same material. This is how wisdom works, not as a possession but as a process, not as something you arrive at but as something you are always in the middle of. And the stories themselves, the great ones, the ones that lasted, had a quality of inexhaustibility. You could hear them many times and find something different in them each time, not because the words had changed, but because you had. Because the person hearing the story about Odin trading his eye for wisdom at 20 years old is not the same person hearing it at 40, or 60, or on a night like this one, at whatever point in your life you happen to be, lying in the warmth, with the fire dying down and the stars turning slowly above the turf roof. The stories change as we change, or rather we change, and the stories are still there, unchanged. And the difference between who we were and who we are is visible in the gap between how we heard them then and how we hear them now. What does it mean to give something up in exchange for wisdom? Odin at the well of Mimir spun the well of memory, of deep knowledge, of the kind of understanding that goes all the way down to the roots of things, did not hesitate, according to the stories. He arrived at the well and he asked to drink from it, and Mimir, the keeper of the well, told him the price. 1 eye. And Odin, the All-Father, the ruler of the gods, the being of greatest power in the Norse cosmos, reached up and took out his own eye and placed it in the well and drank. What he saw with one eye after that, no story fully describes. But the implication is that he saw more than he had seen with two, not less, not the same, but differently, more completely, in a way that one-sided vision, paradoxically, makes possible. Because when you cannot see everything, you learn to look at what you can see with greater attention, greater care, greater depth. Perhaps this is something the dark teaches us every night. When the lights go out, when the visual world shrinks to the immediate and the familiar, when the eyes can no longer range over distances and gather information and assess and compare, perhaps then the other kinds of seeing become more possible. The seeing that happens in the body, in the feelings, in the half-images that drift through the mind in the approach to sleep. The seeing that is less like looking and more like listening, less like grasping and more like receiving. You are practicing that kind of seeing now, in the dark, with the fire low, with the day finally behind you. The village has gone completely quiet. Not the quiet of an hour ago, which still had the potential for sound in it, the possibility of a voice, a footstep, a door. This is a deeper quiet. The quiet of a place where every person and every animal is finally, fully committed to sleep, where the waking world has been suspended until morning, where the only things moving are the things that move without any help from human intention. The fire settling into its last embers, the fjord breathing against its shore, the stars completing another increment of their long nightly arc. This is the quiet that exists at the center of things. The Norse had a concept for it, or something close to it, in their idea of the world between moments, the pause between one age of the cosmos and the next. In their understanding of time, the world had not always been as it was, and it would not always remain so. There had been ages before this one, and there would be ages after. The great cycle of creation and destruction and renewal, which would culminate eventually in Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, and then in the rising of a new world from the sea, green and fresh and ready to begin again, was always in process, always moving, like the tide. But in the middle of any cycle, there is a stillness, a pause at the top of the breath, before the exhale, a moment of suspension, of pure potential, before the next thing begins. This is that moment, in the small cycle of your own night. The day has ended. Sleep has not quite begun. You are in the pause between the old and the new, the pause that holds, if you are very still and very quiet, a quality of pure openness, the sense that anything could come next, that the next breath could carry you anywhere, that the world is momentarily unheld and unscripted and available in a way it really is when you are busy living inside it. Stay in the pause for just a moment longer. Feel the openness of it. There is no need to fill it. The fire breathes. The walls hold. The dark presses gently against every surface of this place, against the turf roof and the wooden walls and the closed eyelids of the sleeping, pressing gently, like something that wants to be let in, not out of menace but out of kinship. The dark is related to rest. The dark is what rest lives inside. They belong to each other, rest and dark, the way the tree belongs to the soil, the way the fjord belongs to the sea. Let the dark be welcome. You have nothing it can take. It is only here to hold you while the other work happens. The invisible work, the work of the body and the brain and the dreaming mind that can only begin when the waking mind finally, graciously, stands aside. Your waking mind has worked hard today. It has done what waking minds do: assessed, decided, worried, planned, remembered, anticipated, judged, adjusted, revised. It has been active from the first moment of the morning and it has served you well. Thank it, quietly, the way you might thank someone who has been carrying something heavy on your behalf. And then let it rest. Let it set down what it has been carrying. Everything it has been holding can be picked up again tomorrow, when it is fresh, when the morning light has given it back its clarity and its strength. Nothing will be lost. Nothing will be missed. The night will keep it all safe, in the same way the embers keep the fire banked under ash, waiting, alive in a quieter way than flame but no less real. Sleep is not forgetting. Sleep is remembering a different way, and somewhere in the long, dark, patient hours between now and morning, your mind will do things you cannot supervise and cannot predict and cannot fully understand. It will process and integrate, and sometimes, if you are lucky, it will dream. And the dreams of a night like this, a quiet night, a warm night, a night spent in the company of old stories and older fires in the oldest darkness, those dreams might carry something worth keeping. Or they might carry nothing at all but rest. And rest is enough. Rest is more than enough. Outside, the wind has settled completely. The fir trees are still. The stars have moved another increment along their paths. Jana, the guiding star, steady in its place above the northern horizon, the fixed point around which everything else revolves. The fjord is dark and glassy and reflects the sky back at itself, so that for a moment, if you were standing at the shore, you might not be able to tell which was the real sky, and which was the reflection, the stars above or the stars below, the darkness overhead or the darkness underfoot. This is the gift of still water on a clear night, the abolition of the line between worlds. The Norse believed that the night was not empty. They believed it was populated with dreams, with wandering hunger, with the quiet activity of beings that preferred the dark and the stillness. Not threatening beings, mostly, simply different ones. The kind that appear when the noise of the day has finally, fully fallen away. You might sense them at the edge of this moment, not as something to be afraid of, but as something to be aware of. That sense of depth behind the darkness. That feeling that the world is larger than it appears in daylight. It is. The world is very large, and you are very small. And both of these are wonderful. Somewhere out on the fjord, a bird calls one saloon, perhaps, or some northern water bird whose name you don't need to know. And the sound carries across the still water and arrives at the shore and climbs the hill and finds its way through the gap above the longhouse door, and reaches you like a message from the deep night, like a small, clear note struck on an instrument tuned to a different key than anything you normally hear. Listen to it. Let it pass. Let the silence after it be even deeper than the silence before. There is a moment, in the approach to sleep, that is very difficult to describe. It comes at different times for different people. For some, it comes quickly, almost before they are ready. For others, it takes longer, requires patience, requires the willingness to simply stay in the approaching sleep without forcing it. But it always comes. It is the moment when thought becomes image without your quite knowing when the transition happened. When the narration in your head, that constant, running commentary on the world, begins to skip, begins to leave gaps, begins to trail off like a sentence whose end you've forgotten before you've reached it. That moment is very close now. You can feel it at the edges. The embers breathe in the hearth. The walls of the longhouse are solid around you, thick with turf and timber and the memory of many winters. The stars move above in their long, slow circles, tracing paths that have nothing to do with hurry and everything to do with patience. The sea is below. Always. The sea, dark and deep and impossibly old and entirely unconcerned with anything but being itself, which it does without effort, without thought, without any need for approval or understanding. You are here, in the warmth, at the edge of sleep. The Vikings called it not awe of the night, nature, the truth of things as they are in the dark, stripped of the day's performance and pretense and noise. This is your not aura, this quiet, this breath, this slow, heavy, welcome weight of rest arriving. Let the longhouse hold you. Let the embers keep their watch. Let the fjord murmur its oldest syllable against the stones. You do not need to do anything else tonight. You do not need to be anywhere else. You are exactly here, and here is enough. Here is more than enough. The fire is low. The dog is dreaming, its paws moving slightly, following some path through some inner world where it is running through tall grass or chasing something bright. The children are fully asleep. The adults are close. And you are already halfway into that other country, that soft dark place where the hugger roams free, and the 9 worlds breathe around you like a great sleeping thing. And the tree at the center holds everything together with its roots in the deep water and its branches in the high sky. Go there. It is waiting. It has always been waiting. The night is long, and quiet, and full of the oldest kind of peace. Rest now. Rest.